And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another instalment of my Ultimate New 52 Reading Guide video. To provide a bit of background here, I have over the last few years read the entire DC New 52, that's over 3,500 issues, and I've used that read through to create the internet's most comprehensive reading guide. That involved making a map and an infographic that fills up the entire of the New 52, and this series is a result of that, and today's video is the hotly anticipated video 5.1, The Batman Family. Before we go any further, I would stress that even if you think you know what the New 52 is, or even if you only want to read one specific character or series in the New 52, and Batman is by far the most common, you still need to watch the introduction video to this series, which is video 0.0. That will cover a lot of the broad concepts and principles that underlie the design of this guide, and I won't be re-explaining these points here as I come across them. So if you watch this, and see that I mention things in passing like the convergence line or type P readers, you might find it a bit confusing, so go back and watch the introduction video, the link is in the description below. Now, before we start, I have to let you know that this run assumes that the reader is familiar with the whole pre-New 52 continuity of Batman before the Flashpoint event happened. In that way, it's a lot like Green Lantern. I'm aware that makes it seem a bit daunting and continuity heavy to get into, but don't worry, I've distilled that down into 9 key points you need to be aware of before you get into the New 52 Batman. So, number 1, Batman is Bruce Wayne and he saw his parents killed when he was 8 years old. Number 2, he became Batman. He has a Batcave and he has a Batmobile. Number 3, the original Robin was called Dick Grayson and eventually went on to become Nightwing. Number 4, the next Robin was Jason Todd. He was killed by the Joker. He was subsequently resurrected and became the anti-hero known as the Red Hood, and he eventually rejoined the Bat family. Number 5, the next Robin was called Tim Drake, and he eventually left Batman to become Red Robin and strike out on his own. He's mainly in the Teen Titans now, and we'll cover that in a later video. Number 6, the final and current Robin is Bruce's biological son, Damien Al Ghul. He's the son of Bruce and Talia Al Ghul. Talia is the daughter of Ra's al Ghul, one of Batman's enemies. Number 7, Batgirl, who is Barbara Gordon and the daughter of Commissioner Gordon, was shot by the Joker and confined to a wheelchair. However, she's recently had experimental surgery, she can walk again, and she's now Batgirl once more. Number 8, events like Nightfall and No Man's Land have all happened in this reality. That's a lot to cover there, but don't worry, you can start this comic run of reading without it, and if you get really lost, turn to Wikipedia. And finally, number 9, Batman has his usual villains library, Joker, Two-Face, Scarecrow and so on. Most of these guys are quite famous pop culture icons, so you probably have some idea of them already. If not, don't worry, it's not an impossible barrier to reading this part of the New 52, and when in doubt, go to Wikipedia. So now, with no further ado, here is the Ultimate New 52 Reading Guide. Today's episode is one that I suspect will have the most interest of any of the ones that I do. This is 5.1, the beginning of our dive into the Batman family of comics. Now, if you're following through at home, let's zoom in. We've got Flashpoint in the middle, and north of Flashpoint, right here, are all the Batman comics. There's a huge sprawling number of them, and so this video series is going to be from 5.1 to 5.6, just to cover Batman alone. Right, let's dive into the flagship title of this part of the New 52, which is here. Now, I'm aware that many people consider this to be the best New 52 title of the entire era, and essential reading. I am, of course, talking about Batman, which ran from 2011 to 2016. It's written by Scott Snyder and drawn by Greg Capullo. Now, this is Batman Volume 2, as in volume with a big V. Batman Volume 1 was actually from 1940 to 2011, had 713 issues. The New 52 represented the first time this series ever got renumbered and ever got started as a new volume with a big V, and with a new issue on. So this was a huge deal. So the first volume we're seeing here, this is volume with a small v, so the first volume is Court of the Owls. This collection collects issues 1 to 7 and forms the first half of a complete story. Now, I'm going to zoom out a little bit here, and we need to follow this lineup. I would normally have clustered these closer together, but I need to fit in these other volumes next to it for reasons you'll see soon. And here we have the second volume, which is volume 2, City of Owls. That collects issues 8 to 12 and Annual 1. Now you really need to read both of these back to back. In other words, you need to read the first 12 issues and Annual 1 all in one go, because it's really one singular contained story. Having said that, it's worth noting that Volume 2 is actually our first interaction with the first crossover event, which is Night of the Owls. Now, Night of the Owls is a massive crossover. It crosses over with everything all the way from here, Detective Comics, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Batman and Robin, Nightwing, Batman, all the way over here to Detective Comics, Batgirl, Catwoman, Birds of Prey, Batwing, and even over here there's an issue of All-Star Western. Now, I'm not going to cover that during the Batman videos because I view that as being part of a different family of comics we'll discuss in a later video. But it is here if you want to group everything together on your map, if you downloaded and printed this out yourself. So that's the Night of the Owls crossover. It is available in its own standalone collected hardcover because it is a crossover event. And you can pick that up separately. I've also got a reading order which I'll put up on the screen here. Although it's worth noting you can read this entire thing in basically any order. You see, the thing to remember about the Night of the Owls crossover is that all the stories are disconnected one-shots. There's no overwhelming reason to get that separate collection or even try to hunt them out and read them as you go through. My recommendation is just to read the Batman series, ignore the rest of the tie-ins, and then just read them as they come up in whatever series you're reading at the time. Also, and this is a bit of a pro tip here, please don't confuse the event The Night of the Owls with the second collection of the Nightwing series, which I'll show you here, which is actually called Night of the Owls. That's easy to get confused and easy to get that mixed up. I'll be covering Nightwing in video 5.3, but right now just be aware that that's a separate standalone volume. Okay, so back to Batman. If we scroll up, here we have Batman, Death of the Family. So this is the first major Joker story of this era. It's worth noting that this particular volume, Volume 3, comes in two editions, one with a white spine and cover and one with a black spine and cover. Whichever one you pick is down to you, and there's no difference internally, but personally I got the white spine one as it keeps up this half-face motif which tends to run through all the Death of the Family single issues. Now, a lot of people ask about this, are very curious about this, so I'm just going to stress now, this is written to exist as a perfect standalone in the Batman series. You do not need to read the entire event to see what's going on here. However, the event as a whole comprises crossover 2, which is Death of the Family. Now, crossover 2, Death of the Family, crosses over here with Red Hood and the Outlaws, Batman and Robin, Nightwing, Batman, Detective Comics, Batgirl, and Catwoman. Okay, they also have one-shots that are included in Suicide Squad, as I mentioned in video 2.3, and also in Teen Titans. Now, the Suicide Squad one isn't a real tie-in, it's really kind of a total waste of time. I don't think it's important enough to warrant including it on the Bat Family part of the map. In terms of the Teen Titans issues, those are actually already included in the Red Hood tie-in over here. So if you're reading this series, you don't need to stop and leap over to Teen Titans and read that as well. It's already included. Now, this is all contained in a standalone event book, which I'll show you here. It's got a distinctive cover, distinctive fonts. I will stress, this book is called Joker. It's not called Batman. It's called Joker and Joker Death of the Family. And that's what the standalone Death of the Family event book is called. Don't let that confuse you. It is still all these issues. I'm also going to show you a reading order here. A couple of points about this reading order. The reading order I'm showing you doesn't match the listing in the solicitation for the standalone event book. I don't know if that's wrong on Amazon or if the event book actually collects the wrong things, but trust me, these are the crossover issues. There's no more, no less. These are Death of the Family. And I know this because I have the single issues in front of me right now while I'm recording this. Also, something I want to point out is all these lines are pretty standalone. You can read the Batgirl one by itself and end with Batman 17, or the Nightwing one by itself and end with Batman 17. Essentially, you shouldn't view this all as one chronological sequence. It's more like a series of separate arcs that all converge and end on issue 17 of Batman. As such, this isn't so much an order as a list of what's included, with the one exception being where it shows a Teen Titans issue in between the two Red Hood and Outlaw ones. That's important. They're a linked event, and so that is the chronological sequence. But the collected editions for Red Hood and the Outlaws and also Teen Titans include the tie-in issues you need, so don't worry about that. So, as such, although you may want to read the full event book instead of this one slim Batman volume I'm showing you now, which collects issues 13 to 17, you really don't need to. All the different series handle this event in a self-contained way, and I wouldn't recommend buying the standalone event book, as around half of the tie-ins are rubbish, in my personal opinion. We'll cover the tie-ins in the other volumes as they come up in the next few videos anyway. However, I will offer you one pro tip to stop you getting confused. There are several series in the Bat family of New 52 comics that have named their third trade collection as Death in the Family. So to give you an idea, the third trade collection of Batman and Robin is called Death in the Family. The one of Nightwing is called Death in the Family. Batman is called Death in the Family. As I recall, Batgirl is called Death in the Family. So is CAPULLO. You see what I mean? A lot of them have the same name, Death in the Family, even though they've only got a couple of issues that tie in. Don't let that confuse you. Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit and then let's scroll up. Now, after Death of the Family, basically we jump back a little bit. And I say that because although these are now the next issues, chronologically these are set earlier than the ones that we've just read. So what we have is, to start with, we have volume 4, 0 Year Secret City. That includes issues 21 to 24. And then straight after it you should also read volume 5, which is called 0 Year Dark City. That contains issues 25 to 33 but skips issue 28. Now both of these volumes you can see here with the 0 year branding on the top of them, they're set before the rest of the series, as I said. In fact, they're set 5 years before most New 52 series and depict Batman starting out his career in Gotham at a time when he's totally unknown and the city is in the grips of a series of calamities caused by the Riddler. And yes, I'm aware that leaves a gap between the Death of the Family and Secret City, which isn't collected, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, of these two volumes that you can see here, a total of 12 issues are collected, which means that 0 Year actually covers, in the comics universe, a 12-month period in the history of Gotham City, right at the start of Batman's career, which is pretty cool. So there's some stuff to be pretty clear on here. This is our introduction to a third crossover, which is crossover 3, called 0 Year. I've mentioned that several times before because it's something people get very confused on. 0 Year is collected as a separate event book I'm showing you here, which contains all the 14 issues that are in it. Now, of those 14 issues, they span the following series that I've listed there in this reading order, as well as single issues from Action Comics, Green Arrow, Green Lantern Corps and The Flash. Now issue 25 of all of those is included. Now the event book only collects 2 issues of Batman, so instead of buying the crossover event book, you could instead buy these 2 trade collections here and still buy the standalone crossover book, as there's not much of a double dip. So to reiterate, the event collection for crossover 3 0 Year does not collect all the Batman issues that take place during that period of Gotham's history. So for that you need volumes 4 and 5. What that means is that reading the crossover book really is a separate standalone where you're making up your own mind on what you want to do in terms of reading and collecting. So to make it even more complicated, I will just quickly touch on this. 0 Year has nothing to do with 0 Month, 0 Hour, or the DC New 52 0 Omnibus. I cover that in my introduction video anyway. So generally speaking, I wouldn't let this crossover slow down your reading, as you do not need to read the event book to make sense of any of this. And in fact, several tie-ins are quite weak and not worth the effort. Anyway, I've shown you the reading order. Feel free to pause it and have a look at that in more detail. But what I will say is that all those issues are disconnected and can be read in almost any order. So now I'm going to pan back from the map and we're going to continue our journey up. And here we have volume 6, which is called Graveyard Shift. Now this is a very odd volume. Volume 6 Graveyard Shift contains issues 0, 18, 19, 20 and 28, which you'll remember we skipped over earlier. Then also issue 34 and annual 2. This might seem like a random load of issues, but actually reading them in this order is a great and coherent way to do so. They contain issues that disrupt the narrative flow if you read them in a different sequence. And again, another reason to read the New 52 in trade collections like these. As an aside, I find it random, weird and unnecessarily confusing that the cover of this collection that we're looking at right now is actually from the issue Detective Comics 27. Why DC? It's just confusing. So again, zooming back and moving upwards. And with that, we get to Batman Endgame. Now, this is the return of the Joker, and Volume 7 Endgame is actually the heart of crossover 5, which is also called Endgame. That's available as a separate event book, which I can show you here. However, almost all of the event is contained within Batman. This volume collects issues 35 to 40, and again, there really is no need to track down the other tie-ins. Now, I did say crossover 5. If you're wondering where crossover 4 is, I'll explain that in the next video. Again, you will note that this standalone book is called Joker, so it's called Joker Endgame, not Batman. This happened with the Death of the Family event book, and again, please don't let that confuse you. Endgame is a fantastic Joker story and a perfect sequel to Death of the Family. The tie-ins are found in the reading order here, but don't really add much to the story. Again, I view the sequence as arbitrary. The issues on the left are the core story, the ones on the right are random tie-in issues which can be read in any order and add very little. Also, when you're looking at the map, if you just pan out a bit, again, I think I mentioned this before, but I've gone to some effort to make sure that things are grouped together where possible. So the tie-in issues, you have Endgame here, an issue from Gotham Academy there, Arkham Manor there, Detective Comics there, and Batgirl there. So actually, generally, you can sort of loop around them all if you've printed this map out or you're using something like this yourself. Now, we come up to the convergence line, which is this red line here. And many people think you should stop reading Batman after Endgame. I disagree, as the issues that follow are still very good in my opinion. But as usual, I'm going to sort of dive through them and give you an idea of where they fit in. So when we cross through the convergence line, as you can see, like with many series in the New 52, this marks a marked shift in tone for the series. In particular, as you can see on the cover here, this shows the introduction of Bunny Batman, a very unpopular and controversial move. So this volume here is volume 8, is called Super Heavy, and it contains issues 41 to 45. I quite enjoyed it, but opinions vary. If we scroll out and then scroll up, we then have volume 9. This is called Bloom. It contains issues 46 to 50 and Detective Comics issue 27. Do you remember that one? It was the cover to volume 6. I know it's confusing. This series then collects issues in here, issues 51, 52 and Annual 4 and the Futures End one-shot, and they're all contained in this volume, which is volume 10 Epilogue. I think this is a wonderful fitting capstone to the series. I think it's a great final volume. I would highly recommend having all 10 trade collections in your collection. That's what I have. I think it's great. But as I said, opinions vary. One last thing, if you are keen on getting a bit more Snyder and Capullo, but you don't want to dive straight into DC Rebirth, you can follow up reading this with jumping straight into All-Star Batman, which is a series of 3 trade collections that are technically in the DC Rebirth universe, but are standard size hardcovers and also written by Scott Snyder. I haven't included them on the map here because they're technically not in the New 52, but if you can't get enough, that's where you'd go next. So I'm just going to zoom out just to give ourselves a little bit of perspective. And you can see here there's a lot that we're still going to be talking to over the next few videos. But here we go, let's get back to basics. So let's answer the question everyone wants to have answered. How to collect the New 52 Batman? What formats are available? Well, there's the standard paperbacks, of course. Then there are the standard size hardcover versions, which are what I collect. You'll note that the hardcover volume 3 here is in the white spine version. The black spine version has a different cover image, as I mentioned earlier. But either way, when you're collecting standard size hardcovers and paperbacks, this is what they look like on your shelf, which is great. Now you've got volume 1 and volume 2 collected in absolute edition format. Remember that an absolute edition is the largest size comic you can generally get, and is substantially larger than normal hardcovers with extra features like ribbon bookmarks and deluxe slipcases and so on. At the time of filming this, there's been a recent DC Omnibus collecting issues 1 to 33. It's an Omnibus Volume 1 of Batman by Snyder and Capullo. As a result, I imagine there'll be a part 2 at some point collecting everything else. However, I am pretty sceptical as to whether this is a good way to read the series. It feels like someone at DC just thought, hey, let's combine the first 5 trade collection in chronological order. And it does leave huge unanswered questions as to what will be in Omnibus Volume 2, as well as bringing up problems like the sequencing of issues 19, 20, 28, and so on. I mean, you get the idea. I'm not a fan of that way of collecting or reading. In addition, there are a few trilogy box sets that I don't approve of that look like this. All 10 volumes are collected here, as you can see. They're paperback, but they're in slipcases that collect volumes 1 to 3, and then 4 to 6, and then 7 to 10. Now, I'm not a fan of these, but I understand that some people might prefer them, and I guess they make nice and straightforward gift sets for people too. Going back to the map, I just wanted to address a point that several YouTube channels have gone on about many times, about how this entire series is ripe for the Absolute Edition treatment. The first Absolute Edition is done, and that collects this volume here, Volume 1, and then Volume 2 there. And so a lot of thinking is that, well, actually, you could have another Absolute which would contain all the Death of the Family issues from crossover 2, Death of the Family. There could then be a 0-year Absolute Edition with the 10 crossover issues included, and then an Absolute Edition of Endgame with the various Endgame crossovers and so on completed, and then an Absolute Edition for the tail end of the series. Now, I think this is both terrible and unlikely for lots of reasons. So, firstly, DC has only ever released one 5-volume Absolute series before, and that's Sandman, here. And whilst I personally think that this Batman run is better than Sandman, I think DC editorial would disagree. As a side note, this is why I, like many other people, am also deeply sceptical that the Fables Absolute series will ever see the light of day and be fully completed. That's a separate conversation. Secondly, this would mean collecting all the dross and nonsense involved in some of those crossovers, which I could frankly live without. But who knows, the first Absolute doesn't include the various issues from crossover 1, Night of the Owls, so maybe they will, maybe they won't. That's all I wanted to say about the different formats this is all available in, guys. As always, you can make up your own mind, make up your own choices. Collecting taste varies so much. And hopefully you found that dive into this map that I've created useful and interesting. There's going to be another 5 videos in this series, and they're going to cover everything else covered in these black circles in the same sort of very detailed step-by-step approach. So that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. As always, please like, comment, subscribe and share more widely. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on the New 52 and on this series of videos as it continues. Let me know in the comments below, or tweet me at IamThomasJudge. As always, these videos are only possible thanks to your support for this channel by heading over to Amazon.com and picking up the first episode of my prose novel No Gods or Kings, which is available for less than $1 and is over 200 pages long. It's a series of interviews from a future where superpowers are real and the entire world has changed dramatically as a result. If you have Kindle Unlimited, the first volume is completely free anyway. For those of you that are interested in downloading this map and infographic I've created for the entire New 52, that's also available on my website, which is nogodsorkings.com, and that's in the description below. So whilst you're there, why not pick up the first book and support the channel? Until next time, stay classy.